Good evening, everybody, and it's really wonderful to be here with you. I should also say good evening, good morning, and good night. Kia ora to those who are joining us from New Zealand. Fáilte to those of you who are joining us from Ireland. And as I say, hello to everybody else, and I know I'm probably missing several languages there. Tonight and this morning, we have people on the call from New York, Dublin, London, Budapest, and of course, New Zealand. Before I start, we would like to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, who are Grant Thornton, Beecham's, Dorsey and Whitney, Ovation Incentives, Lonsdale Capital Partners, KMCO Group, Spark Crowdfunding, Hannon Travel, Ebury, Channel Site, CPL, and the World Trade Centre for their continued support, because of course without you it would be a very different network indeed. It gives me really great pleasure to be here with you because I had the most wonderful experience of traveling to New Zealand myself at the end of January and the start of February, and little did I know when I made that 36-hour journey home, it was going to be the last time I was going to be in a plane for a long time. I know both of the speakers in different ways. I've had the pleasure of working with Peter when he was in Hong Kong, and of course I heard the legacy stories that he left after him in New York, Korea, Tokyo, and Singapore. And also I could say digitally met Peter Lennox when I spoke for the Irish Business Network New Zealand, which is the IIBN of New Zealand, a couple of weeks ago. So what we're going to do tonight and this morning is we're going to talk about the opportunities in the New Zealand market. We have two people who are exceptionally well placed to talk about them. And rather than go through their individual biographies, I think we'll just weave parts of their story in throughout the session tonight. Also, of course, as is typical in every single IIBN event, please do send in your questions. I'll be keeping a good eye on that. And I'll be more than happy to put those to our more than accomplished speakers in order to answer them. So first of all, Peter, that's going to be confusing, right? So Peter Ryan, ambassador, Irish ambassador to New Zealand. Can we start off with you? Now, you are the most entrepreneurial diplomat that I've ever met, and I've had the pleasure of meeting, a few now, but you're definitely the most entrepreneurial diplomat that I've ever met. So will you, first of all, tell us a little bit more about you and your journey along the way, please?
Thanks, kia ora, Susan, and Peter, and Alva, and everybody on there. Thanks for the opportunity to join you this morning from a little bit of a wet and windy Wellington. It's not something we can always say about Wellington, and Peter Lennox can tell us better than most about the weather that we experience here. But it's great to have the opportunity to join you. I think it certainly seems like a lifetime ago that Susan, since you were here yourself, you packed a lot into a very short visit. You got around Auckland, Christchurch, Wellington, if I remember right. You packed what it takes most people to do a month to do into a week, and I think that's one of the abiding memories for us of our time here. Will have been your visit and the visit of other people here, because I think New Zealand seems to be on everybody's bucket list. It's just one of those places, in the same way that Ireland is on the bucket list for so many people in the US, and indeed here in New Zealand also. And I think there's a very easy familiarity together. And I think everybody who seems to come down and visit here always leaves with the intention of, I'm going to come back and I'm going to stay longer the next time. I'm going to discover more of what New Zealand has to offer. So we were asked to come down here in 2018 to set up the embassy here, and I'm here with Teresa and the three girls, and we're really just trying to extend Ireland's footprint here, reconnect with members of our diaspora here, a very considerable diaspora, and to see what we can do to support interactions for mutual benefit for both New Zealand and for Ireland. And your visit here, Susan, was part of that. And an important element in that is kind of building out the business networking and connecting with members of the Irish diaspora, and also friends of Ireland here. So we've lots of great friends of Ireland here who don't have Irish heritage, but who have a connection with Ireland in some shape or form, whether they've done business there, whether they've an interest in Irish culture, or or they've done business globally, and there they've connected with guys like Peter and with others who are literally global business guys, and guys who operate very comfortably on a global level. So that's really, I hope that gives you some introduction on what we're doing. Obviously, we've been a little bit distracted for the last few months with everything that's gone on, and it has been quite an eye opener and quite a privilege, in fact, to be here in New Zealand, of all places in the world, while this has been, while the crisis has been going on, because the people have dealt with it. The team of 5 million is what they call that's the kind of one of the rallying cries, if you like, that the Prime Minister here, Jacinda Ardern, had used. And I often thought, every time I saw a team of 5 million, I always thought of a team of 70 million, because when we talk about Ireland, we talk much more about our diaspora and our global kind of community. So if New Zealand has a team of 5 million, we have a team of 70, and it has been very heartening to see the way that the New Zealand public has rallied around taking the steps that are necessary in the recent past. And there are definitely some lessons for other places in the world. But I think New Zealanders would be the first to say that this is a marathon and not a sprint, as recent days have shown us. But there are definitely lots of learning opportunities between New Zealand and Ireland. Anyway, look, that's enough from this, Peter, to hopefully get the ball rolling.
Thank you, Peter Ryan, and indeed it does give us a sense, and I think I can certainly tell everybody who's joining us here is that we'll get a chance to really delve into a range of what Peter Ryan has said. But as I move to Peter Lennox, one of the key things that stands out in your own career journey has been your time at a very senior level at New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. And particularly, Peter, what I'd be interested in hearing is, how does New Zealand sell itself? Peter Ryan there talks about a team of 5 million. I mean, it's an island economy just like we are. It's in a remote part of the world. And we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about all of the challenges that people may think, whether they're real or otherwise, about doing business there. But can I just ask you to maybe share with us how New Zealand sells itself when it's seeking to do business abroad? Just Peter, you might just turn on your sound. You're muted there at the moment. Okay, we can see you. We're just waiting to. Okay, there you go.
You got me.
We have.
Sorry, I lost internet connection there for some reason, which is unusual. So my apologies. So I didn't quite get the whole of the question.
Sure. Just my question to you was, as somebody who worked with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, how does New Zealand set itself apart, or how does it sell itself as a destination, either to sell into from an export point of view or from foreign direct investment?
Yeah, it's New Zealand's an interesting country. So English is a second language, especially because of the accents that the Kiwis use. So fish becomes fush. Eggs become eggs. And I remember once when I first arrived at the airport wondering what this chicken was that they kept on talking about. Of course, that was check-in. So you have to get used to those idiosyncrasies. You have to remember it's a country population the same size as Ireland, roughly the same size as Ireland. However, it doesn't have a economic safety net. So New Zealand is on its own. Taxpayers, 2 to 2.5 million taxpayers. If the country defaults in any way, there's nowhere else to turn to. So when I was in Scotland, there wasn't the rest of the UK. Ireland, there wasn't the rest of the European Union. And that brings a psyche to the way that they work here. The things that I found were the budgets were much smaller, but the innovative ways that the Kiwis work and think stretches those budgets really far. And they've got a number of cliches here regarding the Kiwi way of doing things, and something called number 8 WAR, which is that they can put things together with a lot of effort, but with little cost. And that was something that I had to adapt to, because I was used to larger budgets where I came from. However, it's very pertinent for the country. And where they've got the lack of that investment generally, they make up for the innovative ways that they approach things. So I find it a very, very exciting country to work in. From a foreign direct investment point of view, it's not like Europe or it's not like the United States because there's not a huge market here. And even Australia is 3.5 hours away by plane, so you feel very, very isolated. However, there are still opportunities in certain niche areas to make a difference because of the expertise that has been developed here. There's also something else that's really important that I've come across, and that is the diversity of the people. So when I first came to New Zealand, I thought it would be an old British colonial outpost with Caucasians everywhere. And that's as far as the truth as you can get. It reminds me a lot of New York and New York City, that melting pot. And just as an illustration of that, in MetService, the weather company that I work in, we have 30 different nationalities working there. So you think of the cultural mix, you think of the languages, you think of the experience from other parts of the world. But like the early United States, so there's really camaraderie around making it work in New Zealand. And leaving Christchurch and other things aside, it's a very, very safe place to be. The other side to it is the Indigenous people, the Maori people. And if you look at the way that they've been handled over the years compared to many other countries, it offers a way that things should be done, especially laterally. And we have to pay a lot of attention to Maori culture and embed that into a lot of the business offerings that we put forward. And it's great to see that the Aotearoa, the language of the Maori is prevalent and as a second in New Zealand. But we have to be a culture and bring that into many of the business practices. As a stepping stone for Australia, for specific things, yes, but in general foreign direct investment terms, no.
Well, that's a pretty definitive answer there, Peter Lennox, and thank you for that. And just, I mean, I have to say I was really struck by the connection with the Maori culture in New Zealand when I was there, because in my mind, naively, that New Zealand people were Kiwis, and therefore I didn't actually get that understanding. Part of my visit actually was when I spent an hour and a half in a car with Peter's deputy, Farron Foley, who explained all to me, all about how Maori and Kiwis, etc., all work together. And you know what I found actually? And people who have the native Kupla Focal, which I know many of you do on the call today, is that I found a lot of people couldn't find the English translation of the Maori term to get across their point, like you sometimes hear people saying in Irish. Peter Ryan, I'm going to bring you back in here. I think it's pertinent that I go to you, particularly since it's just breaking now that Ireland has been elected and has secured a seat on the United Nations Security Council. So, I mean, when we talk about Ireland being a team of 70 million, or when we talk about it being part of a global network, or even when we talk about the culture of doing business, could you just share a little bit about how you feel the Irish are perceived and what the Irish community is like in New Zealand, so that, you know, I think part of the success of the Irish International Business Network is the landing pad this network offers to many of us in new territories. And you're an extension of that naturally in New Zealand. So could you just share in the context of that breaking news tonight, and as previous ambassador in New York, what you think?
Yeah, thanks very much, Susan. Yeah, my thoughts are with you know, everyone I suppose who's been involved in the Irish effort at the United Nations for 60 plus years now. 62 years we've been a member. We are rightly proud of our contribution there as peacekeepers. We've had unbroken service on peacekeeping duty for 60 years now. There hasn't been a day for 60 years when there hasn't been Irish men and women on peacekeeping service with the United Nations. Absolutely unique record, resonates very strongly with people, and I think our journey as a nation and the development of Ireland, the economic development of Ireland, is also something that resonates with our partners around the world. I think in this region here, you know, certainly with New Zealand and the Pacific Islands, we have a very long track record of working with them. We would have worked very closely with New Zealand on the Non-Proliferation Treaty and nuclear disarmament, on the Council for the Status of Women. and on a number of other UN initiatives over the years. And then with the small island states in the Pacific, we know each other very well for a long time. We've had a similar post-independence, if you like, post-independence development pathway, and we recognise as a small island ourselves, although when you come down to the Pacific, you realise when people say small island, they mean something different than we do when we say small island. But nevertheless, a lot of our challenges will be quite similar, and our development journey is similar. And I think we certainly have a reputation as bridge builders in Ireland, and we've been extraordinarily fortunate with the people that we've had in leadership in Ireland in some shape or form, and that includes people like Bono and others who have really taken a global, been active on a global stage to try to help others who are going through what we went through. So I think today, whether we like it or not, global votes at the United Nations and so on, look, they're another opportunity for the nation to put its best foot forward and to highlight and showcase some of the best of Ireland. And I think so. This is a good opportunity. It's an important day for us. It's a good opportunity to tell some of our stories, and also to redouble down on our efforts to share our experiences and to listen to our friends, our like-minded friends around the world. And it's hard to find somewhere that's more like-minded than between New Zealand and Ireland. And I think New Zealand is in that unique place. And I think Peter touched on it there earlier. You've got something like 20% of the population of New Zealand born overseas, which is still pretty, a remarkably high figure, probably. I think when Kingsley Aikens was here, he told us that figure was something similar, but just for the working age population in Dublin, not necessarily for all the population in Ireland. So it means that you have you have quite a disparate community here. You have a community that is kind of really highly developed, in a very modern economy, a very globalized economy in some senses. Not all parts of the economy are globalized, but certainly in my time around Asia and in the US, it would have been very common to meet Kiwi professionals. It would have been very common to meet representatives of some of the big Kiwi companies, very active globally. And I think that, we do find commonality with them. And if you think that statistically 1 in 6 Kiwis have some Irish heritage in them, if you think that I'm sitting in a city, as is Peter, a city named after a guy who was born in Dublin, and if you think that at one stage in the 1880s, 25% of all the immigrants to New Zealand were from the island of Ireland, then you'll begin to understand the extent of our reach here. And I suppose one of the opportunities that I would certainly see is the chance to, raise awareness of that amongst the global Irish diaspora around the world, and indeed also within New Zealand, and to try to encourage people to do more business together, and to have more collaboration.
I was really taken by that statistic that 1 in 6 Kiwis have some Irish heritage, and it's one that Peter loves to share, and with absolutely really good reason to as well, for sure. And there's a range of those statistics. I think when you talk about the similarity between the number of our population, just a couple of statistics before I go back to Peter Lennox, is that there's 600,000 people in New Zealand whose employment either relies directly or indirectly on export. So, I mean, it's a very, very open marketplace. It espouses the principles of that. And one other thing I just want to mention, when Peter mentioned about a non-proliferation treaty and the work to do with women, and maybe it's a little known statistic that New Zealand was the first country in the world to give women the vote. And I learned that on a great tour of the Beehive, which is the parliament in New Zealand. So I love banding that one around myself for very obvious reasons. So Peter Lennox, one of the things that struck me about your own biography is that you collaborated with key investors to help set up the largest agriculture and biotechnology fund in the Southern Hemisphere, which was approximately $200 New Zealand dollars, of course. Now that was some feat, But in order to do that, you must have had very deep sectoral knowledge. Agriculture is a huge, huge industry in New Zealand, as it is particularly a big employer in Ireland. So could we maybe just delve into the business opportunities specifically in New Zealand from a sectoral point of view, please?
Yeah, okay. I'll just correct you. Even though we are tied in New Zealand, it was $200 million, not $200. So I
Sorry.
think you left out.
Apologies. I forget the million bit. What's that between friends, Peter?
The other thing is about New Zealand, when you were introduced, Peter and myself, that was the other anomaly. I was at a meeting in my first week here, and there were 8 of us, and we're all called Peter. So it's a very, very common name, extraordinarily common. And thanks again to Peter Ryan. We talked about the statistics, but Peter really has raised the bar for the Irish community here in New Zealand. A cohesive unit, very, very exciting. Opening the embassy here is wonderful, but Peter's enthusiasm, expertise, and charm has made a huge difference to the Irish diaspora here. So thank you, Peter. I just want to make that known. And the agriculture side, we get lots of trips from Ireland, from Irish farmers, especially, and from British farmers as well, looking at how efficient New Zealand is and how it's able to reduce certain products in a way that isn't subsidized, and especially through the European Union. And they're in many cases gobsmacked by this. Now, there may be experts on here that will disagree with me on that, but I'm telling you, I've seen it, and the word I get from those that travel here. So they're really interested in the efficiency and the methodologies that we use here. And I know that a number of companies have joined forces in that to share the technology from Ireland and from New Zealand to increase that efficiency. So I think it was Einstein said that shared knowledge is gained knowledge. And that certainly is the way that we approach that. So there are specific areas. New Zealand is a prolific growing country. So we've got the rain at the moment. And for those in Wellington, by the way, it's going to get windier at lunchtime and certainly a bit colder as the southerly comes in. But things grow remarkably quickly here. And that's one of the advantages that we have. And because of that, the prowess in agriculture especially, and in stock is fantastic. And the other thing about the New Zealand psyche is that New Zealanders love to travel around the world. And it's called their overseas experience, especially when they leave school or university. And a lot of them end up in farms in different parts of the world and gather that experience from the different methodologies there, and then bring that back to New Zealand and blend it with the things that they know here. And from that, morphs something that is even more special. And I know that the relationships with other farmers and agricultural people is really important. Now, how did we set up the fund? We set up the fund because it was a program I was involved in called the Beachheads program, where we deliberately went around the world to get experts that had affinity with the country that we were interested in and affinity with New Zealand. And we brought these experts together in groups of 5, 6, 7, or 8. It's still an NZTE program. And through their advice, the practitioners were able to pick up ideas of best practice, but also links with other businesses in those countries that these beachhead advisors came from. So what we did was we tapped into their experience and knowledge, used that as a stepping stone to say, well, what is relevant for New Zealand? What do we need here? Where are the gaps? Where would the government be willing to help fund these things? And certainly in the agriculture side and parts of that, and also in parts of the pharmaceutical side, that came to fruition.
As I was listening to that, I was just thinking about how that is the secret after all, Peter, isn't it? It is, levering, as Peter Ryan would say, they're the friends of the country and tapping into their networks, but also understanding the gaps and taking it from there. And Peter Ryan, I'm going to go back to you on this. because I see the questions are coming in, and please do indeed keep them coming. One of the things that this organization is all around is, of course, building a network. And Peter, it's your job and you're naturally brilliant at it. But you have to build a network, not just for yourself, but obviously for the country as well, being the ambassador. And I've seen you do this, build business networks like the Irish Chamber in Hong Kong. I've seen you, maybe some of people on the call don't know this, but actually he is a founding member of the Asian County Board as well, and led the Hong Kong ladies footballers to winning the All China Games last year that I saw. But also, of course, at the heart of the Department of Foreign Affairs. So you really know what it's like to build a network, and to build a network bigger than yourself. For somebody who might be interested in starting off in a country like New Zealand, I mean, certainly one of the similarities that I can see is that they're great crack, just like we are, but all the same, you need to have that sense of rapport, you need to have that sense of confidence, you need to put your foot forward. So how have you done it, and what can you teach us today about it?
Well, thanks for that glowing recommendation. I thought you were talking about Peter Lennox there, maybe. Certainly from my perspective, one of the lovely things about the Irish community around the world, and maybe the reputation that precedes us, and precedes people in lucky enough to have my job, is the residue of goodwill that's there, and the platform of goodwill that's there, to be honest. And that I think we normally don't have to push too hard to encourage people to get involved with us and to help us out and to point us in the right direction. And I think one of the main aspects for me, Susan, is always around the mutual benefit piece. That this isn't a one-way exercise for us. There's learning here, and I think Peter touched on it there. For example, we're talking about in the agriculture space. So we have a number of our universities in Ireland, and the agricultural specialists are working with agricultural specialists here in New Zealand. And that's for mutual benefit of both sectors. I think, we can let the marketeers battle it out for market space over at the final products when they're looking for global markets for them. But I think that the main practitioners and the farmers, they can benefit so much from shared researching, shared collaboration, and the sharing of experiences from both sides of the world. And it's interesting because it's something the Prime Minister herself brought up with Minister Heather Humphreys when Heather was here last year. And when the Minister was here last year, and the first thing the Prime Minister said to her was, I know all this great work has gone on in agriculture. How do we build on that, and how do we make sure that we can encourage as much collaboration as possible, and we can let the private sector worry about the private sector market, the market access issues and so on, but that there's a lot of potential collaboration that should be taking place. In terms of building a network, there's lots of good networks here. So I think the Irish Business Network of New Zealand, you mentioned, now got a presence in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Palmerston North, extending probably to Invercargill and Dunedin down the South Island also, and Hamilton, the North Island. So look, there is a very good network here. And I think one of the things about New Zealanders, and one of the things that, that's really special about the place here, is the scale is almost the ideal size. I mean, it's in that it's possible to cover the place and to cover key people here quite quickly. That's one of the big advantages that we would say always about Ireland also, that you can be in Dublin, you can be in Belfast, you can meet the key people in a few days. You don't have to spend all your life here. In Dublin, New Zealand is the same. Everybody is separated, by 5 degrees or less, and you can find it's very easy to access key people here. And I think there's an openness and a readiness to do that as well. So I think you found that, Susan, when you were here. I hope others find that. And certainly that's what we are here for as an organization and as individuals. That's what we enjoy anyway, is connecting people to one another.
Well, I'm going to put a question back to you both just about that. And either feel free, one of you or both of you, to take it. But since I left there, I was over, by the way, for St. Bridget's Day at the Department of Foreign Affairs, doing more and more around that. So since then, I've been on a very active WhatsApp group called St. Bridget's Brigade. I think you'll enjoy that name, Peter, with a range of the people that I met while I was there. But one thing I will say is that I think before the restrictions is that we felt we had to be at an event in New Zealand, we had to be in Auckland, we had to be in Wellington in order to participate in that. And I think that's changed since the world has become ultimately flatter. So I'm just wondering, from both of your point of view, what has changed, I mean, permanently? What do you think has changed as a result of the restrictions and lockdown and, you know, participating on digital networks when we couldn't physically move around the place? What do you think has changed as a result of that, and how could we use that to our collective benefit?
Will I say a few things on that first?
Great.
Yeah. I don't want us to jump to conclusions that the world has changed forever. Human beings have this propensity to slip back into the way that they did things before. So in many ways, the verdict may still be out. However, from our experience and our work experience at the moment, is that there certainly is a willingness to look again at the values in life and the time that families were together during the lockdown had a profound effect on the way that my employees thought about their families. They certainly learned a lot more about them, and were able to stop in time something that goes by in a flash of an eye. And many of us who have had children who are now growing up, we know exactly what that means. So it encapsulated a period where they were able to concentrate on them. And many have taken that away and said, look, I would like more of this. And therefore, the working practices themselves could change. At MetService, we've brought in something called MetFlex, which allows people to be much more flexible in the way that they approach work. Now, a lot of us do it anyway. A lot of us work remotely. But it hadn't been ingrained into the psyche of a lot of people in different striations of the company. And now what we've learned from this is that the network, the communication network itself, is stable enough and robust enough to be able to allow people much more freedom to work from different places. That brings a whole new disciplines in for managers. And we have talked about that. So we're not talking about how long somebody spends at work. It's about the outputs and how you manage them. And dare I say the word police, but police them as well. Because again, humans, there's a whole range of the way that we take on new ways to work. And it's important that the expectations are set and met by those that are involved in this. So I see a new approach to the old 8-hour day, which was changing anyway, but it's pervaded throughout all parts of management and employees.
Well, I think, and Peter, I'd welcome your thoughts on this, on that point as well. But I think, though, possibly what's underlying, or if I'm reading through the lines there and what you're saying too, I think that the whole idea of working from home wasn't just about the stability of the communications network, although that's critical. As someone that has spent the last couple of months in rural Cork, because I was locked down here, absolutely that's important. But I think another key thing that's changed is the trust that people can actually deliver, set and meet the expectations, as you say. Peter, I know it's a huge value of yours to plug the New Zealand into global Irish networks. And I would imagine that that's easier as a result of what we've become very accustomed to doing, including this event here tonight. But what's your own thoughts on post-COVID life?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I think I think Peter's hit the nail on the head there about looking again at our personal values and so on, and looking again at the way that we've structured our lives. So many of us have structured our lives around sitting at a desk in an office. I've been fortunate not to have done that over the years, but I know that many people have done that. And indeed, we're in the process of opening our new embassy premises here. We should be open probably in August or so, and certainly it's given us some food for thought around making the best use of that. And we would have seen that very much as a cultural and community hub. Is that going to be the best use of that space going forward for us, or will things return closer to what they were in the past? Will it just take a little bit longer than initially expected? But certainly one of the points about plugging New Zealand into the global Irish diaspora, I think New Zealand has always kind of flown below the radar in terms of the Irish diaspora networks and so on, and that connectivity hasn't been as strong with New Zealand as it might have been. I think that's I think we've missed a trick with that, to be honest. I think we need to rectify that, and I think there's never been a better time now, given the stock of New Zealand in the world. I think people are who had never heard of New Zealand in the past are aware of it now. I think that they're very they're seeing what generations of us have seen, I suppose, in the fact that they have pragmatic technocratic government, if you like, that there are many features of New Zealand society which mean that it's really well placed for the global economy at the moment, and certainly that's something that probably it's probably easier to get an audience for a New Zealand related issue now than it has ever been, given how New Zealand has dealt with this. And we're seeing that in the approval ratings, or the popularity, I suppose, around the world of the Prime Minister and of the country. And I think that kind of exemplifies what a lot of Kiwis would like their country to stand for, which is, the ability to get things done without too much of a fuss, and the ability to move as a nation and as a people together. So certainly from our point of view, I think we need to have more of a Kiwi presence in our global Irish networks, in our global Irish groups. I think we need to draw more on that, and I think in return that means that there's a far greater opportunity for New Zealanders of Irish heritage to connect with our community members around the world. And it's like the old story about the guys in America. They say, the bottom line is, other countries don't have parades on Fifth Avenue that bring the city, the main city, to a halt, and bring every other city to a halt for that matter also. So that Irish family is it can be really worthwhile connecting with around the world. And I'd love to see New Zealanders of Irish heritage become a little bit more connected with that, because I think that they'd realize that there is a very welcoming aspect to that, and I think they'd enjoy it as well. And I think it would be very refreshing for us to have some New Zealanders in there with a higher profile. Thanks, Susan.
Absolutely, Peter, and I've seen firsthand some of your efforts to do that, and I'm sure over the entire time of your tenure that absolutely will come to pass. I'm going to go to some questions now, and they're particularly sectoral. So 2 in particular are sectoral, so please feel free, either of you, to jump in here. So one is from John Michael O'Hare, and this question is particular to tech companies. He says, do you see the inclusion of New Zealand in the FVEY alliance, that's Five Eyes, as helpful or a hindrance when countries such as Ireland or others do business with them? And if either, how so?
I'll jump in there first of all, then Peter do the political part. I'm very, very cautious of our involvement in certain parts of it. So there's different aspects. And as a global weather company, we know that the mention of Five Eyes with some of our potential customers can seem to be offensive, and brings up the barriers and concerns about, is it much deeper than business? But of course, we've got responsibilities in some areas, so it's a really deft tightrope that we walk on this. New Zealand is a transparent country. That's why it's great to do business here. There's very, very little that's hidden from the public, and anything that is soon found out through the Official Information Act. And that's part of the psyche of the country. So the Five Eyes conjures up all the secrecy and everything around it, but there are aspects of it. It's about collaboration for good social, or for social good. And it's important for us to differentiate that so that we don't slip into a trap where we could be thought of as going beyond that transparency level. So it's a very, very fine line for us.
Peter, just while we're talking about tech companies specifically, do you see any particular opportunities for tech companies? Like, obviously it's a huge area of growth for Enterprise Ireland startups and the startup ecosystem in general. The world is now obviously flat through digital, but it's still, like, New Zealand is still a good distance away. So what do you see there potentially being, what is New Zealand looking for that potentially Ireland could meet from a technical point of view, technology point of view?
I just have to go around the city here. Wellington is a smaller city than Auckland, but I bump into lots of young technologists that have come from other countries, quite a number from Ireland, funnily enough, that are working for smallish tech companies here. And again, there's so many niches or slithers of work there that can offer opportunities to be successful that they're following. And what we have to be careful of is that in New Zealand, we can be spread very thinly. And this is why it's an attraction to bring others in to help the technology companies advance here. The other thing, sorry, it just struck me, when we talk about New Zealanders, people conjure up, again, a certain image. New Zealand is a very, very diverse country. We talked about Maori population, but there's a larger South Pacific Islanders population, which adds so much richness to what we do here. And you can see that in the All Blacks rugby team as well. That's reflected there. And then also we've got a large Asian population as well, specifically from India. And the tech skills that they bring across with them are phenomenal. So this melting pot and this mixture of ideas, brains, and backgrounds is a really fantastic launch pad for new ideas, new companies. And I know there's a number of European companies that have got small setups here because they can tap into that progressive way of thinking of these young New Zealanders, as I've described them.
And if we could move from technology to tourism, and there's sometimes commonalities between them, but this question is from Kieran Bruin. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Kieran. Hi, Kieran, here from IT startup Voizigen. Again, I hope I got that right. We're in the tourism space and have an online platform for organizations to create tourist trails with maps and pictures and have them immediately published online. Would the speakers have any advice for companies in the tourism space and how they might need to adapt given the COVID crisis?
Well, I think on the if I could just touch on one of the other things before coming back to that one, just touch on the tech piece. I think that's a really good some really good advice from Peter there on that. I think there is a well-trodden path here for Irish tech firms doing business in New Zealand. The main insurance platform in the country is run by Fineos. The largest currency exchange company here would be Fexco, who'd be working through Western Union. The largest remittance service in the Pacific region would also be Fexco. Companies like Taxback International and a whole ream of other companies like Evros. Anyway, a whole bunch of other companies will be doing business here in the tech space. So there's a lot of experience in the Irish tech sector about how to enter the New Zealand market and then how to use that as a base into which to go into the Asia Pacific market, but also as a test bed, if you like, given its size and given its diversity, as Peter said. And that applies to companies from right across the island of Ireland. So InvestNI is very active here in the market, as well as Enterprise Ireland, and some companies have come directly themselves. But look, we're around to help and to open our networks and to provide whatever advice we can around that. I think in the case of the tourism sector, I think New Zealand is leading the world in a lot of the work that it does around tourism, and certainly in terms of nation branding and so on, in terms of pure New Zealand effort. It's really, it's really worth taking a look at that, and I'd recommend your question there to take a look at the New Zealand story. They've done a lot of work around branding and how to pitch New Zealand to the world. And it's very good to understand that if you're doing the reverse. So if you're coming to New Zealand and trying to talk to New Zealand, it always makes sense to me to understand what they're saying, what they're telling the world, because it gives you an insight into the way that they view things. And look, if there's any help we can provide with that, we can connect. We'd be happy to connect in and make a few introductions around that. I think one of the things that we're seeing here, we have quite a few Irish people, as you would expect, in the hospitality and tourism sector here. Also, one of the things that we're seeing here, obviously, is that because of the closure of the borders here, largely the closure of the borders here, we're seeing a big push for domestic tourism. We're seeing a major push for New Zealanders to get out and to enjoy even more than they already do the attractions of their own country. And I think you're going to see quite a bit of product development, probably a lot more localized product development, rather than what had happened in some cases in the past about the extension of existing hotels and overseas owners coming in and building hotels and so on. I think you're going to see quite a bit of really careful thought going in around cultural tourism, around heritage tourism, around Maori and Pacifica related tourism as well. If people aren't going to be able to travel long haul, or if certainly for a while, at least. So I think there's a really interesting conversation going on there. You'll have seen on LinkedIn that our friend Niall Gibbons is in close contact with his counterpart in Tourism New Zealand. They've had regular calls during this, and they've been exchanging information and exchanging ideas on just around that, how this is going to affect the industry and so on, which is another example of our key industry leaders speaking to each other.
Yeah, great.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just quickly, it allows me to plug MetService, of course, because the weather is so important in the tourism industry. And for those that don't know, we provide the weather to Fiji 4 in Galway. So I've been over there a number of times, and we're very excited about that contract. Also Al Jazeera and all of Australia, but that's the plug. Why am I saying that? I think that what you have to think about here is the business to business and business to customer links that you've got. So as Peter quite rightly said, I think the focus is going to be on domestic tourism. So have to work out who your customers are and who they should be. And are those customers the direct customers? Are they businesses that align with those customers? And there's a lot of hard graft to do that. And also I think there's going to be greater emphasis on people finding new things in New Zealand to do. So again, what are the uncovered gems? What can you enlighten people about? Because certainly over the next couple of years, I think international travel, and certainly our forecast for aviation, will be down quite a bit. So the homework about who your customers are, what are you providing them with, and is that appropriate, being a business or being a customer themselves, a direct customer, and how are you going to do that? So you talked about the platform you've got. Is it good enough, and does it meet the needs of those that you're targeting? Sorry, basic stuff, but that's the way to look at it.
Well, it absolutely is. There's no doubt about that. That's the way in which to look at it. And I suppose in getting help to do that, I have a couple of answers that I'll provide to this after either Peter takes this one on. It's a very practical question. What incentives or grants would there be available for Irish startups to establish a presence in New Zealand? Is there a New Zealand equivalent of Enterprise Ireland?
I'll start and then let Peter go into it, because he'll probably know this more from an Irish perspective. The Economic Development Agency in New Zealand is called New Zealand Enterprise, and I worked for that for a number of years, and it's got many different facets. It works in sectors, it works in foreign direct investment, it works in exports, and it works in indigenous development of businesses here. In fact, it was an amalgamation of 3 units in 2002. One was Investment New Zealand, one was Trade New Zealand, which was to do with exports, and one was Industry New Zealand, which was to do with indigenous work here. So they are a fantastic organization. I know they've just had a big boost in funding from the government, again, to kickstart or keep the economy going. The professionalism of the staff there is second to none. They're very, very clever people, and they know the ins and outs of packages to help companies. I don't know the details of it. I just know that you're in great hands there, and they've got fantastic links with the likes of IDA and Scottish Enterprise and other similar economic development agencies. And when I was with them, we won the best of the best economic development agencies in the world in 2008. And I remember we were in Geneva to receive that award. So that's just how good they are.
Peter Ryan, do you want to pick up on this?
Well, good on you, Peter. That's good to hear. I think one of the features about things here is that, you know, the place is very flat. It's very easy to make those right connections, and I think, you know, we're happy to help if people are interested in looking at doing business here. I think, you know, we can very quickly connect people to the right contacts, and I think one of the things for me is that, you know, New Zealand has all of these measures in place. They have regional measures as well to try to help and assist. But I think really it's a question of, you know, what you're bringing to the table and you know, is New Zealand the right fit for you? And I think that's certainly something worth looking at. And we're hearing more and more from our colleagues in Enterprise Ireland that more Irish firms are finding that New Zealand is a really good fit for them. The market size, the access, the ability to hire good people, the ability to, you know, and that ecosystem that is here, and to connect with other firms or other potential customers, and to use this as a springboard into either bigger market next door, into Australia, or into the regional market. So look, I think there are a lot of supports there, and we'd be happy to connect in anyone who is interested in taking a bit of a closer look at the market. Sorry, Susan, just add to that. I talked about the national body, the equivalent of Enterprise Ireland or IDA, and Peter quite rightly pointed out that there are local organisations that are very, very proficient and just as professional, that know the ins and outs of working in those particular regions. So there are local economic development agencies like ATEED in Australia, in Auckland, and others. So great connections and advice from them.
I just want to let people know that, again, I have first-hand experience that when Peter Ryan says that he and his colleagues at the embassy are open to helping you to launch into a new market, he really, really means it, I have to say. One of the things that annoys him more than anything that I have learned is when people don't substantiate what they say. So believe me, when he says that, he really does mean that indeed. Just really 4 really quick things I just want to mention to people on that area. The TAME grant is the trade assistant, technical assistance for micro exporters. So that would be for very small companies looking to export, and it could particularly help you if you want to exhibit at a trade show. And the second one I want to mention is the Market Discovery Fund from Enterprise Ireland. That's quite a substantial fund to help companies find new markets. The Trading Online Voucher, of course, as well, there's now 2 of them, as announced by Heather Humphreys. An extra 14.5 million has been dedicated to that to enable Irish companies to export. And finally, do business online. And finally, Enterprise Europe Network is an organisation that connects a lot of Irish architecture, the entrepreneurship architecture, including Invest in I, as Peter mentioned, to directly. They have an office in Wellington as well. So just they might be of value to you. So, we've now come almost to the end of our session today and this evening, and I just want to take you through what you've just heard. First of all, New Zealand has an easy familiarity of the Irish. Peter Ryan says that lots of people say they're going to stay longer the next time. And by the way, I'm one of those, definitely. He said that what he wants to do is to reconnect with the diaspora and to build the business network by connecting with Friends of Ireland. He talked about how Jacinda Ardern talks about the team of 5 million and we're a team of 70 million. Peter Lennox then picked up on something that I found very funny when he said English is a second language because of the accent, and there's a colleague of Peter called Trina who absolutely taught me that. The population is around about the same size as Ireland, but there's 2.5 million taxpayers. By the way, pre-COVID-19 there was 2.3 million people in employment in Ireland, so broadly similar there as well. But he said the difference between us is that there's no safety net. There is no European Union or trade with the UK. He mentioned it's a fallacy really to think that Australia is a hop, skip and jump away. It's 3.5 hours in a flight. So really what New Zealand is open for is for niche areas of the markets, and that New Zealand does remind him of New York, where he spent a significant amount of time, as did Peter Ryan, that it is a cultural mix and it's the global experience right around the country. He then said that, Peter Ryan commented on the breaking news this evening. He says that we have had unbroken service for 60 years in peacekeeping, and that resonates a lot with our international partners, that we also worked directly with New Zealand through the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And also, he just mentioned that 20% of the population in New Zealand come from overseas, and of the working population in Dublin, it's actually a similar number. He said New Zealand is a globalised country, just like us, and that 1 in 6 Kiwis are of Irish heritage. Then Peter Lennox said that when we look at agriculture, that New Zealand is able to produce certain products in a way that isn't subsidised, and that we can often learn from how they are so efficient and their way of producing it. He quoted Einstein to say that shared knowledge is earned knowledge, and this is really a way in which we can work together. And then he said lots of people travel around the world and work on farms and bring back the learnings back home to New Zealand. He gave us the secret sauce to building his $200 million fund. That's million now, Peter Lennox, in case anybody forgets it. The $200 million fund, he said that in particular, the key thing to do is to meet the Friends of New Zealand, and then from there, learn from their best practice, connect with their network, find the gaps and see what government would fund. Then Peter Ryan said that in essence, by building a network in the way in which he's done so, from a sporting, cultural, business, governmental, diplomatic and every other way, he said that generally being Irish is a platform of goodwill. We don't have to wait long until we're given direction, but that needs to go both ways. And he particularly mentioned about universities and how universities in Ireland and New Zealand learn from each other when it comes to agricultural practices and others. He referred back then to the Irish network there, the Irish Business Network New Zealand, called IBINS. You'll find them on Twitter and you'll find them naturally all over the country. But he also said that scale is almost of the ideal size in Ireland. And then Peter Lennox went back to talking about how the fact that families who have worked together during lockdown or been together during lockdown has had a profound effect on home life. And lots of people want more of that. The communication network is now stable enough to handle it. And now we can believe that needs can be set and met by people working from home. Peter Ryan then went on to tell us that the new embassy is going to be opening in August, and he's questioning now whether it should be a cultural and community hub. Will we go back to the way we used to in terms of meeting each other, or should the space be used for something else? He then said, New Zealand has flown below the radar and we've been missing a trick. He won't let us do that anymore, I can tell you. It's never been a better time to connect with New Zealand, given the stock of it right around the world, and particularly its ability to get things done without much of a fuss. And particularly his Prime Minister, or the Jacinda Ardern, is somebody who's really, really shown that. He then, then Peter Lennox said that many are cautious of the connection with Five Eyes, and he said the mention of them is potentially offensive, as he questions, is it deeper than business? However, the key point that he wanted to get across is that New Zealand is a very transparent country, and that's the way it will remain. Then he went on to say that there's lots of young technologists working in particularly Wellington, and that people are coming from all over the world. He particularly mentioned India, but also that there are opportunities for Irish people there, again, from a niche point of view. He also told us what the weather would be like later on today in Wellington, and I believe he has that on very good authority. He also then said that New Zealand is a very well spread out country, so bringing in new talent is helpful. Then Peter Ryan then said that New Zealand is a well-trodden path for companies. He said the largest currency firm is Fexco. He quoted tax back in a range of other companies. He said Invest NI is very active. And he said, particularly for the people looking into tourism, that they need to take a look at the New Zealand story. He said a big push is to get out and about, to enjoy your own, for New Zealanders to enjoy their own country. A very much a message being repeated here by Fáilte Ireland. And then he said that there's a lot around cultural and heritage tourism, and both Tourism New Zealand and Tourism Ireland are making sure that they have got a good communication structure to learn from each other and naturally enough to refer to each other. Then we finished off the conversation with looking at the equivalent of Enterprise Ireland, which is New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, which Peter Lennox had a very significant role in building. It's a fantastic organisation to keep the economy going. Then Peter Ryan said the place is flat and it's great to make connections. New Zealand has got a range of measures on offer in order to attract companies in. He says that the word from Enterprise Ireland, who are also active both in Australia as well as in New Zealand, is the country the right fit for you. It might be a springboard into the region, it might be a springboard into Australia, but it's a very nice market to start off with. And then Peter Lennox finally finished off with local organisations also know the ins and outs, so there's lots of support available. So that was what I picked up from you both this evening. Apologies that I didn't get to everybody's questions. Some of them I didn't quite get to ask for, but you actually covered it. Agatha sends in a lovely message there to say, as usual, an excellent summarization. Thank you very much. And then George also says, thank you for a tremendous informative webinar. All three speakers are highly motivational. So indeed, thank you to both of you. Thank you to Alva and to Connor, to Fiona and all the team at IIBN for giving me the opportunity to speak to these speakers. We have literally traversed the world. We've brought you breaking news, and hopefully we've brought you a lot of insights that you can take and implement. Thank you to each and every person who's been here tonight and today and this morning. Kia ora and Gorabila Mahagat. Agwiv.
Thanks. Stay safe. Thank you.